I never thought betrayal would have a smell. But it does. Antiseptic and cold, just like the hospital room where Nikolai promised to stay by my side through every chemotherapy session. Through every treatment, every dark moment, I'll be right. Here, he swore while holding my trembling hand. I believed him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my fiancé, my rock, my future. Then came the text message on the morning of my most aggressive treatment. I can't do this anymore. The hospital, the sickness, it's crushing me. I need space. That night, as poison dripped into my veins to fight the cancer, I saw the truth. On social media, a photo of Nikolai with my yoga instructor Valentina at a beach restaurant, laughing. He chose another woman while I fought cancer alone, abandoned when I needed him most. But what he never expected was that I would be reborn through this fire, stronger than before. Nikolai proposed to me at sunset on the cliffs overlooking the sea, where we'd first met at a photography workshop 3 years earlier. It seemed poetic then. The amateur photographer and the investment banker, an unlikely match united by a chance encounter. When I said yes, I believed I'd found my forever person, the hand I'd hold through every triumph and tragedy. We're unstoppable together, Annika, he'd say, kissing my forehead as we planned our future. The minimalist downtown apartment, 2 kids, summers in Greece. I ignored how he subtly redirected my career aspirations toward more practical pursuits, how my photography equipment gathered dust as I took on administrative work that accommodated his schedule. Love means compromise, I told myself, not recognizing I was the only one compromising. The diagnosis came without warning, a rare form of blood cancer discovered during a routine physical. In the sterile examination room, as the doctor outlined survival rates and treatment options, Nikolai's hand found mine. Through every treatment, every dark moment, I'll be right here, he promised, his voice thick with emotion. You're not facing this alone. I believed him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my rock, my constant, the future I was fighting to live for. The first days after the diagnosis moved in a blur. I watched Nikolai research my condition late into the night, his laptop screen illuminating his determined face. He accompanied me to specialist appointments, taking meticulous notes while I sat frozen, still unable to process that this was happening to me, to us. We'll get through this, he would say, squeezing my hand as we left each consultation. Whatever it takes. When I cried about losing my hair, he showed me photos of elegant headscarves and promised I'd still be beautiful. When I worried about the cost of treatment, he assured me our savings and his bonus would cover it. When I confessed my deepest fear, that I might not survive, he held me against his chest and swore he wouldn't let that happen. I started making preparations for the battle ahead. I joined an online support group, researched nutrition that might complement my treatment, and even photographed myself, hair intact, body still strong, wanting to document the before while I still had the courage. Nikolai arranged to work remotely 3 days a week. He transformed our spare room into a recovery space with soft blankets, books I'd been meaning to read, and a small refrigerator for the special drinks and foods I might crave during treatment. His thoughtfulness touched me deeply. This was love, I thought, facing the unimaginable together. The weekend before my first chemotherapy session, we went to our favorite spot on the coast. The breeze was gentle, the horizon endless, and for a few hours, cancer seemed distant. We sat on a blanket watching the waves, his arm around my shoulders. When this is over, he said, we'll travel. All those places we've talked about but never visited. Life's too short to wait. I leaned into him, treasuring the certainty in his voice. In that moment, cancer felt almost like a cruel but temporary detour in our journey together, not the crossroads it would become. On the morning of my first treatment, Nikolai arrived at the hospital with a gift, a delicate silver bracelet with a phoenix charm. For your rebirth, he explained. After the fire of treatment, you'll rise stronger. The treatment room was busy with other patients in various stages of their own battles. Some looked resigned, others determined. A few were alone, and I silently thanked whatever forces had given me Nikolai. As the nurse inserted my IV, His steady presence beside me felt like a shield against the fear. That first session wasn't as terrible as I'd imagined. The discomfort came later. Waves of nausea, fatigue that made even lifting my head from the side pillow a monumental task. Nikolai was attentive, bringing ginger tea for the nausea, reading aloud when my eyes were too tired to focus, fielding concerned calls from friends so I wouldn't have to explain my condition repeatedly. For 3 weeks, our rhythm continued this way. The routine of treatment, recovery, brief moments of normalcy, then preparation for the next round. I began to believe we might actually navigate this path without losing ourselves. What I didn't notice then, or perhaps chose not to see, were the subtle changes. How Nikolai would step outside to take calls, how his work emergencies seemed to coincide with my worst days, how his patience thinned when my nausea kept me awake all night, leaving him sleep-deprived on his work days. I was focused on survival, on making it through each day, each treatment, each side effect. Perhaps that's why I missed the warning signs that our love might not be as resilient as I'd believed. My yoga instructor, Valentina, stopped teaching classes after my second treatment cycle. I'd been a regular at her studio for years, finding balance and peace through her guidance. When I asked the studio owner where she'd gone, he mentioned something vague about a personal sabbatical. I was disappointed. Her techniques had helped me manage stress before cancer, and I'd hoped they might help during treatment too. Maybe she'll come back when you're ready to return to class, Nikolai suggested when I mentioned it. There was something in his tone I couldn't quite place, but I dismissed it as my imagination, distorted by medication and exhaustion. As my treatment intensified, my body changed dramatically. Weight fell away, leaving angles where curves had been. My hair came out in clumps until I finally asked Nikolai to shave my head entirely, wanting to take control of at least this one aspect of my unwanted transformation. He did it tenderly, kissing my bare scalp afterward, assuring me I was still beautiful to him. But his eyes told a different story. I caught him looking at me sometimes with an expression I'd never seen before. Not disgust exactly, but something like pity mixed with detachment. It wounded me more deeply than I could admit, even to myself. Still, I clung to his promise. Through every treatment, every dark moment, he would be there. We would emerge from this nightmare together, stronger, for having weathered it. The phoenix charm on my bracelet became a talisman, a symbol of the rebirth that awaited us both after this trial by fire. I had no way of knowing that the true test of our love was yet to come, or that Nikolai's promise would prove as fragile as my health. The first round of chemotherapy hit me like a freight train. I lost weight, then hair, then the energy to maintain the facade that everything would quickly return to normal. Nikolai was there initially, rearranging meetings, bringing ginger tea for the nausea, reading aloud when my eyes were too tired to focus. But as weeks became months, something shifted. His visits grew shorter. Calls went to voicemail. Big client meeting became his mantra. I noticed my yoga instructor, Valentina, had abruptly stopped teaching classes, but was too consumed by my treatment schedule to question why. Then came the morning of my most aggressive chemo session. Nurses prepped me as I anxiously checked my phone, waiting for Nikolai's on-my-way text. Instead, I received, "Annika, I can't do this anymore. The hospital, the sickness is crushing me. I need space." That night, delirious with pain and betrayal, I made the mistake of checking social media. There it was, a friend's post accidentally tagging Nikolai at a beachside restaurant. Beside him sat Valentina, my former yoga instructor, her hand intimately placed over his. The timestamp, exactly when I had been vomiting alone in a hospital bathroom, fighting not just cancer, but now a shattered heart. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes clearly saw. The casual intimacy between them wasn't new. The easy way she leaned into him, the familiar grip of his hand on her waist. This betrayal had been building while I fought for my life. The nurse found me sobbing, clutching my phone, my body trembling so violently that my IV line pulled loose. She assumed it was a reaction to the chemotherapy, not realizing I was experiencing a different kind of poison, one that attacked not my cells but my very sense of reality. I tried calling Nikolai repeatedly that night. Each call went straight to voicemail. I left messages that evolved from confused to desperate to angry. I texted questions that never received answers. The silence was deafening, confirming everything I feared but couldn't yet fully acknowledge. The next day, as I lay weak from treatment, my phone finally lit up with his name. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice distant, rehearsed. "This wasn't how I wanted to tell you." "Tell me what exactly?" I demanded, though I already knew. "Annika, I care about you. I always will. But this situation, watching you suffer, it's destroying." "Me, I can't be the person you need right now." "And Valentina? Were you planning to tell me about her?" His pause said everything. "That just happened. I've been seeking support to deal with everything, and she understood what I was going through." "What you're going through?" My voice rose despite my weakness. "I'm the one with cancer. I'm the one fighting for my life while you're seeking comfort in my yoga instructor's arms." "It's not like that," he protested weakly. "She's helping me cope." "While I cope alone?" The tears came again, hot and angry. "You promised, Nikolai. Through every treatment, every dark moment, those were your exact words." "I know what I said," he replied, his voice hardening. "But I can't do it. I'm not strong enough for this, Annika. I thought I could be, but I was wrong." In that moment, I saw him clearly for perhaps the first time. Not the steadfast partner I'd imagined, but a man who'd made promises beyond his capacity to keep, who retreated when commitment became truly challenging. "I need to collect some of my things," he said after another long silence. "I can come when you're at treatment so we don't have to make this harder." "You mean so you don't have to face me?" I corrected him. "Take whatever you want. It doesn't matter anymore." He began saying something about staying friends, about helping financially with my treatment, but I ended the call. There was nothing left to say. The next few days passed in a blur of physical pain and emotional numbness. I went through my treatments mechanically, responded to the medical staff's questions automatically, and returned to an apartment that suddenly felt both empty and full of ghosts. Nikolai had indeed come while I was away. His closet stood open and half empty, his favorite books gone from the shelves, his electric toothbrush missing from the bathroom. He'd left his key on the kitchen counter beside a check with a sum that felt like both guilt money and an insult. I tore it up immediately. I would rather sell everything I owned than accept his pity payment. Friends called, awkwardly trying to navigate the situation. Most didn't know what to say, caught between their relationship with both of us. A few mentioned seeing Nikolai and Valentina together around town, then quickly changed the subject when they saw my expression. One friend, Mira, was different. She arrived at my door with groceries and a fierce loyalty that demanded no explanation. "He's dead to me," she announced, unpacking soup containers and fresh bread. "Anyone who leaves during cancer treatment doesn't deserve another thought." I appreciated her anger on my behalf, but found I couldn't match it. I felt hollow, drained of the energy necessary for rage. All my strength was devoted to survival now, physical survival against cancer, emotional survival against abandonment. A week after Nikolai's desertion, my oncologist adjusted my treatment plan. The cancer wasn't responding as hoped to the initial protocol. More aggressive measures were needed, with harsher side effects and longer hospital stays. I sat alone, in the consultation room, absorbing this news, wondering how I would manage without even the support I'd thought guaranteed. The weight of it felt crushing, impossible. "Is there someone we can call?" the doctor asked gently, noticing my silent distress. "A family member or partner?" I shook my head, swallowing hard. "No, it's just me now." His expression shifted to something I recognized. The same look nurses exchanged when patients arrived. Alone for treatment, a mixture of pity and concern. I hated it instantly. "You'll need support," he insisted. "These next phases will be challenging." "I'll manage," I replied, more sharply than intended. "I don't have a choice, do I?" As I left the hospital that day, I caught my reflection in the glass doors, gaunt, pale, with a scarf wrapped around my bald head. I barely recognized myself. The woman Nikolai had proposed to on those seaside cliffs was gone, replaced by this fragile stranger with hollow eyes. In that moment, something hardened within me. Not quite determination yet, but a seed of it. If I was going to fight this battle alone, I would do it on my terms. If Nikolai couldn't bear to witness my suffering, then he didn't deserve to witness my recovery either. That night, I blocked his number and removed him from all my social media accounts. I asked friends not to mention him to me again. I gathered every photograph of us together and sealed them in a box that I pushed to the back of a closet. The physical reminders were easier to remove than the memories. Those ambushed me at unexpected moments. The sound of a laugh similar to his in a hospital corridor, the scent of his cologne on a sweater I hadn't yet laundered, the habitual reach for my phone to share a thought before remembering there was no one waiting for my call. Each reminder was a fresh wound, each memory another battle on a front I hadn't anticipated fighting. Cancer was consuming my body, but Nikolai's betrayal was consuming my spirit. I didn't know yet how to rebuild myself from these twin destructions. I only knew that somehow I had to find the strength to continue. Not for him, not for what we had been, but for whatever might remain of me when this was over, if I survived at all. The following weeks were my lowest. Cancer ravaged my body while betrayal poisoned my spirit. I considered stopping treatment. What was I fighting for now? My future had walked out the door, traded me in for a healthier model during my greatest need. The physical pain of treatment became almost welcome, distracting from the emotional wound that wouldn't heal. Dr. Elena Mikhailova, my oncologist, noticed the change. Unlike other doctors who focused solely on my blood work and vitals, she saw me, the person disappearing behind the patient. After a particularly brutal treatment session, she sat beside my bed instead of rushing to her next appointment. "The cancer doesn't know you've been betrayed," she said quietly. "It will keep fighting whether you do or not. So, the question is, who are you fighting for now?" Her question lingered long after she left. That night, staring at the ceiling of my hospital room, something shifted inside me. If I survived, when I survived, it wouldn't be to win back Nikolai or prove something to him. It would be because I deserved to live, for myself alone. The next day, when Dr. Elena made her rounds, I asked her to bring my old camera from home. "I want to document this," I explained. "All of it. The ugly truth of fighting alone." She didn't question why. She just nodded and a few days later placed my dusty camera bag on my bedside table. "I think this is important," she said simply. It was the first spark of my rebirth. I started slowly, photographing the mundane details of hospital life. The IV drips that tethered me to survival, the bland food trays, the institutional ceiling tiles I'd memorized during sleepless nights. Then I turned the lens on myself, capturing my transformation without flinching. The protruding collarbones, the dark circles under my eyes, the bare scalp that felt alien under my fingers. Each photograph was an act of reclamation. This is me, I thought as I reviewed the images. Not the woman who was abandoned, but the woman who remains. The nurses grew accustomed to my camera, some even helping me set up shots when my strength faltered. One especially kind nurse named May offered to take pictures of me during treatment, capturing angles I couldn't manage myself. "Why do you want these?" she asked once, scrolling through the stark images on my camera display. "Most people want to forget all this when it's over." "I don't want to forget," I replied. "I want to remember every moment of becoming whoever I'll be after this." My new treatment protocol was brutal. There were days when even lifting the camera required more energy than I possessed. The side effects accumulated, not just nausea and fatigue now, but neuropathy that made my fingers tingle and burn, mouth sores that made eating agony, infections that required isolation. During one such isolation period, when visitors weren't allowed due to my compromised immune system, I hit my darkest point. Confined to a sterile room, weak from a fever that wouldn't break, I wondered if the fight was worth it. What life awaited? Me on the other side of this suffering? An empty apartment? A career abandoned? A body permanently altered? Through the glass partition of my isolation room, I watched medical staff go about their duties, families visit other patients, life continuing, while mine seemed suspended. I thought about Nikolai and Valentina building their life together while I fought alone. The unfairness of it crushed me. That night, I wrote a letter I never intended to send. Dear Nikolai, today I realized I might die alone in this hospital room. Not because of cancer, but because I've stopped fighting. What's the point? You were my future, and you chose to leave when that future became complicated. Maybe you were right to go. Maybe loving someone shouldn't require witnessing their disintegration. I remembered when we talked about courage. You said you admired mine, but it turns out I was never brave. I was just lucky enough not to have been tested. Now I know the truth. Neither of us had the courage we thought we did. I'm not writing to make you feel guilty. I'm writing because I need to say goodbye to the person I was with you. The woman who believed love meant never facing the worst alone. She was naive. She dies here, whether or not my body recovers. I hope Valentina never gets sick. I hope you never have to face the reflection of your own weakness. Annika. I folded the letter and placed it in my journal, a burial of sorts for my old self. The act wasn't cathartic as I'd hoped, but exhausting. I fell into a fitful sleep, dreams filled with falling hair and beach restaurants where I couldn't find a seat. I woke to Dr. Elena checking my vitals, her face concerned but professional. Your fever broke overnight, she said. That's good news. I nodded weakly, still half in my dreams. Annika, she continued, more gently now. The nurses tell me you've stopped eating, and May says you haven't picked up your camera in days. I turned my face away, unable to explain the effort it took just to breathe, let alone eat or create. I understand giving up, she said unexpectedly. I've seen it before. It's a valid choice. This surprised me enough to look at her again. But I've also seen people find reasons to continue when everything logical says they shouldn't, she continued. Sometimes the most powerful act of defiance is simply to exist when the world has made that difficult. She placed my camera on the bed beside me. I'm not telling you to fight. I'm asking if there's anything left you want to see or do or be that might be worth the pain of continuing. The question hung between us, demanding an honesty I'd been avoiding. Did I want to live? Not for Nikolai, not for some future that longer existed, but for myself alone. Slowly, I reached for the camera. My fingers felt clumsy, my arms weak, but I managed to turn it on. The last image I'd taken appeared on the screen. A self-portrait captured during a moment of particular despair, my eyes hollow but somehow still mine. I want to see who I become, I said finally, my voice raspy from disuse. I want to know her. Dr. Elena nodded, a slight smile softening her professional demeanor. I'd like to meet her too. It wasn't an immediate transformation. Recovery, both physical and emotional, doesn't work that way. But that moment marked a turning point. I began eating again, forcing down hospital food, not because it tasted good, but because my body needed strength. I resumed my photography, expanding beyond self-documentation to capture the humanity around me. The elderly patient who shuffled the halls with determination, the young nurse whose gentle hands made painful procedures bearable, the changing, light through my window marking days I was still alive to witness. When my blood counts improved enough to end isolation, Dr. Elena surprised me with news. A small gallery space in the hospital's Healing Arts Center was available for an exhibition. Your photographs, she explained. The staff has been talking about them. They're powerful, Annika. They show something most people never see. Who would want to see this? I gestured to myself, to the medical equipment surrounding me. Truth is rarely comfortable, she replied, but it's always necessary. The idea terrified and excited me. To display my vulnerability, my pain, my slow resurrection to an audience felt both exposing and liberating. It was a purpose beyond survival, a way to transform suffering into meaning. That night, reviewing my growing collection of images, I realized what Dr. Elena had done. She had given me a future to work toward. Not the one I'd planned with Nikolai, but one entirely my own. A future where my experience, even the painful parts, especially the painful parts, had value. For the first time since Nikolai's text message, I felt a flicker of something like hope. Not happiness, not yet, but possibility. The woman I had been was gone, but perhaps the woman emerging from this crucible might be stronger, more authentic, more fully herself than before. It wasn't forgiveness I felt toward Nikolai. That seemed impossible and perhaps unnecessary. It was something closer to gratitude for the harsh clarity his abandonment had forced upon me. In leaving, he had inadvertently set me free from a relationship where my worth had been conditional all along. "The cancer doesn't know you've been betrayed," Dr. Elena had said. Now I understood what she meant. My body's fight continued regardless of my heart's wounds. And if my cells could battle with such persistence, perhaps my spirit could match their determination. I picked up my camera again, this time turning it toward the window where morning light was just beginning to break. A new day. Another chance. To discover who I might become. I left the hospital 3 months later in remission, physically weakened but spiritually fortified. The collection of stark, honest photographs I'd taken during treatment had become my lifeline. Evidence of a battle fought alone but won anyway. When friends awkwardly mentioned Nikolai, I surprised myself with my indifference. He and Valentina had moved in together. I found I genuinely didn't care. Instead of trying to rebuild my old life, I made dramatic changes. I sold the apartment we'd shared, used my savings to travel to places Nikolai had dismissed as impractical, and turned my lens toward documenting survivors of various traumas. My photography, once just a hobby, became both therapy and profession. Dr. Elena and I stayed in touch. At first, our coffee meetings were checkups disguised as friendship. Gradually, they evolved into something deeper, conversations stretching for hours, discovered mutual passions. For obscure films and spicy food, laughter that felt like healing of a different kind. "Your photography is extraordinary," she told me one evening, reviewing my portfolio. "You see people at their most vulnerable, yet somehow capture their strength." "I learned that from you," I replied, suddenly aware of how much I'd come to cherish her presence. "You saw me when I was invisible." The moment hung between us, charged with unspoken possibility. She reached across the table, her fingers lightly touching mine. "You were never invisible, Annika. Not to me." My first exhibition at the hospital gallery exceeded all expectations. Staff members who had cared for me during treatment came to view their world through my lens. Other patients found validation in seeing their experience represented honestly. Medical students were brought through to gain insight beyond textbook descriptions of cancer treatment. The local arts magazine ran a small feature on the exhibition, calling it unflinchingly honest yet ultimately hopeful. A larger gallery owner saw the piece and contacted me about potentially showing my work in his downtown space. "These photographs tell a story that needs a wider audience," he explained during our meeting. "They're not just about cancer or hospitals, they're about human resilience." I accepted his offer with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. My private struggle was becoming increasingly public. My pain transformed into art that others found meaningful. It was both empowering and strange to witness. The downtown exhibition opened 6 months after my final treatment. I stood in a black dress that hung loosely on my still recovering frame, my hair just beginning to grow back in a soft pixie cut, as strangers moved through the gallery examining images of my most vulnerable moments. I had titled the exhibition Rebirth After. The process I felt I was undergoing. The photographs were arranged chronologically, from diagnosis through treatment to the early days of recovery, creating a narrative of descent and gradual ascension. Dr. Elena attended the opening, professional boundaries now comfortably blurred, into friendship. She moved through the crowd with quiet pride, occasionally explaining medical details to curious viewers who asked about specific images. As I watched her, I realized how central she had become to my new life. She was more than the doctor who had guided my physical healing. She had witnessed my emotional resurrection, had in many ways facilitated it through her steady presence and belief in my strength when I had none of my own. That night, after the gallery emptied and we sat alone among my photographs, I found the courage to ask her to dinner. A real dinner, not our usual casual coffee meetings. Like a date? She asked, her direct manner one of the qualities I'd come to value most about her. Exactly like a date, I confirmed, surprising myself with my boldness. Her smile was answer enough. Our relationship evolved slowly, mindful of the complex foundation on which it was built. Elena was careful to ensure my continued medical care, was transferred to a colleague, maintaining ethical boundaries even as we explored romantic ones. We discussed the power dynamics of our initial doctor-patient relationship, acknowledging them before moving beyond them. I never expected this, she confessed one evening as we walked along the harbor. It's not something I could have or would have pursued while you were under my care. I know, I assured her. But we're not those people anymore. I'm not your patient, and you're not just my doctor. We're something else entirely now. My photography career continued to develop alongside our relationship. The downtown exhibition led to others, my work gradually expanding beyond my personal cancer journey to document other forms of transformation and resilience. I traveled to places Nikolai had always dismissed when I suggested them: Iceland to photograph the harsh primordial landscape, Kyoto during cherry blossom season, small villages in Greece where time seemed suspended. Sometimes Elena joined me on these trips, her practical medical mind a perfect complement to my artistic perspective. She found beauty in details I overlooked: the precise pattern of veins in a leaf, the mathematical perfection of a spiral shell. Through her eyes, I learned to see differently. On a rainy Sunday morning, about a year after my remission, I was sorting through old belongings when I found the box of photographs I'd packed away after Nikolai left. I hesitated before opening it, uncertain what emotions they might trigger. Inside were images from our life together: vacations, dinner parties, ordinary moments that had once seemed precious. I studied Nikolai's face in those photos, searching for signs I might have missed, indications of the weakness that would emerge when tested. But all I saw was a stranger, someone I had once known intimately, but who now felt remote, like a character from a book read long ago. I felt no anger looking at him, no pain, not even nostalgia. Just a quiet acknowledgement that this person had once been important to me, and now was not. I closed the box and placed it with items to donate. Those memories no longer needed safekeeping. They were simply part of a past that had shaped but no longer defined me. That evening, I told Elena about finding the photos. "Are you okay?" she asked, her concern genuine but not overprotective. "I am," I said, realizing the truth of it as I spoke. "I think I finally understand what people mean about closure. It's not a dramatic moment of confrontation or forgiveness. It's just waking up one day and realizing that person no longer occupies space in your heart." She nodded thoughtfully. "Do you ever wonder what you would say to him if you saw him again?" The question caught me off guard. I had deliberately avoided places Nikolai might frequent, not from fear of encountering him, but from lack of interest in doing so. "I don't think I'd say anything," I replied, after consideration. "There's nothing left to say." As my second year of remission approached, news about Nikolai occasionally filtered through our remaining mutual connections. His relationship with Valentina had ended. She had left him for a wealthy client from her new private yoga studio. His investment firm had undergone restructuring, leaving him in a less prestigious position. These updates reached me like news from a distant country I once visited but had no plans to return to. My life, meanwhile, continued to expand in directions I never would have imagined during my before existence. My photography was being featured in a respected arts magazine. I had joined a cancer survivors mentorship program, supporting newly diagnosed patients through their treatment journey. Elena and I had moved in together, creating a home filled with both her medical textbooks and my artistic chaos. I had regular checkups, of course. The shadow of cancer never completely disappears. But even those had lost their power to terrify me. I had faced the worst and survived, not just physically, but spiritually. Whatever came next, I would face it as this new version of myself, not the woman who had once believed love meant never having to stand alone. One afternoon, as I was reviewing potential images for a new exhibition focusing on survivors beyond their illness, Elena called with unexpected news. "Guess who just became a patient at the hospital?" she asked without preamble. "Nikolai. He's been referred to the oncology department." I sat down, absorbing this information. The irony was not lost on me. the man who couldn't bear to witness my illness now facing his own. "Is it serious?" I asked, surprised by my own calm. "I don't know the details," Elena replied. "Patient confidentiality. I just saw his name on the intake list. I thought you should know he might be around the hospital when you come in for your checkup next week." I thanked her for the warning, then sat quietly after we hung up, processing my reactions. There was no satisfaction in knowing Nikolai was ill, no sense of cosmic justice being served, just a quiet acknowledgement of life's strange symmetries. My scheduled checkup would be my first potential encounter with him since his abandonment. The prospect didn't fill me with dread or anticipation, just a mild curiosity about who we both had become in the intervening time. "Do you want to reschedule?" Elena asked that evening. I shook my head. "No need. If I see him, I see him. If not, that's fine too." The truth was, I was no longer defined by his actions or his presence in my life. The woman who entered that hospital now was not the same one he had left behind. I was reborn through fire, stronger for having survived, alone. Whether or not our paths crossed again was incidental to the journey I continued to make, one step at a time, on my own terms, living for myself this time. 2 years later, my cancer journey photographs caught the attention of a prominent gallery owner. The exhibition, titled Rebirth, would feature my entire collection, culminating in recent work that showcased life after trauma. As opening night approached, Elena and I celebrated in our apartment. Yes, ours, as we'd moved in together 6 months earlier. "I have something for you," she said that night, presenting a small velvet box. Inside wasn't a ring, but a pendant. Camera lens, vintage, rare, and perfect. "For capturing the next chapter," she explained. I kissed her, overcome with gratitude for this woman who had seen my value when I'd forgotten it myself. "I love you," I whispered, 3 words I'd once thought I'd never trust again. A week before the exhibition, I received a message from a mutual friend. Nikolai had heard about my success and planned to attend the opening. Valentina had left him months ago. He was apparently hoping to reconnect. "Does that bother you?" Elena asked, watching my reaction. Carefully. I considered the question honestly. "No," I realized. "It feels like hearing about a character from a book I read long ago. I'm curious but detached." The night of the exhibition, Elena surprised me again, this time with a proper ring and a whispered proposal in the gallery's quiet back room. "Whatever happens tonight," she said, "I want you to remember you're loved completely, for exactly who you are." When Nikolai appeared an hour later, I was ready. He looked older, less confident, his eyes widening as he took in the powerful images, lining the walls, my bald head, my hospital room, my tears, my gradual healing, all captured in unflinching detail. "Annika," he said, approaching cautiously, "you look incredible. Your work is... I've been following your success." "How's Valentina?" I asked calmly. His face fell. "She left 2 years ago. Turns out running when things get difficult is contagious." He laughed nervously. "I've changed. I realize what I threw away." The prominent gallery owner, Marcos Alvarado, had discovered my work through the Arts magazine feature. His downtown space, Gallery Alvarado, was known for showcasing emerging photographers with unique perspectives. When he contacted me about a potential exhibition, I initially thought it was a mistake. "Your work speaks to universal human experiences through a deeply personal lens," he explained during our first meeting. "The honesty is refreshing in an art world often preoccupied with abstraction." I signed the contract with trembling hands, not from fear but from a sense of validation. I'd never expected to feel my suffering had been transformed into something meaningful, something that might help others navigate their own dark passages. The weeks leading up to the exhibition were a whirlwind. Marcos and I selected 30 photographs that chronicled my journey from diagnosis through treatment to recovery and beyond. The centerpiece would be a large triptych titled Rebirth, showing 3 stages of my transformation: devastation, endurance, and finally, emergence. Elena took a week off from the hospital to help me prepare, her practical nature complementing my creative chaos. She organized shipping logistics while I finalized print selections. She reminded me to eat when I forgot, massaged my shoulders, when tension knotted them, celebrated small victories with champagne and coffee mugs. "You deserve this," she would say whenever imposter syndrome crept in. "Your work deserves to be seen." One evening, as we sorted through final print options, spread across our living room floor, Elena asked a question that caught me off guard. "Have you thought about what you'll say if he comes?" I didn't need to ask who he was. Though Nikolai rarely entered our conversations anymore, his shadow occasionally appeared at unexpected moments. "Why would he come?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. Elena shrugged. "The art world is small in this city, and your name has been in the culture section twice this month." I considered this, trying to imagine Nikolai in the gallery, viewing images of the suffering he couldn't bear to witness firsthand. The thought produced no anxiety, no anger, not even satisfaction, just a mild curiosity. "If he comes, I'll be polite," I said finally. "Nothing more, nothing less." The confirmation came 3 days before the opening. A mutual friend texted, "Just FYI, ran into Nikolai at Café Luna. He mentioned he's planning to attend your show Friday. Said Valentina left him for a client, seemed down, thought you should know." I showed Elena the message, watching her face carefully. Our relationship had never been shadowed by jealousy, but this situation was unique. "Does it bother you?" asked. "That he might come?" She considered the question with her typical thoughtfulness. "No, not bothered. Curious, maybe. Protective, definitely." She squeezed my hand. "But I trust what we have, and I trust you know your own heart." The night before the exhibition, Elena took me to dinner at our favorite restaurant overlooking the harbor. The September evening was perfect, warm with a gentle breeze, the water reflecting city lights like scattered stars. After dessert, she excused herself briefly. When she returned, her expression was a mixture of nervousness and determination I rarely saw in her normally composed demeanor. "I had planned to wait," she said, sitting beside me rather than across, "to give you this moment that's entirely about your achievement. But then I realized there's never going to be a perfect time, and maybe perfect isn't what we need anyway." She placed a small velvet box on the table between us. Unlike the pendant she'd given me months earlier, this box had the distinctive shape of something else entirely. "We've both seen how quickly life can change," she continued, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "How promises can be broken, how the future we imagine can disappear in an instant. But we've also seen how beauty can emerge from darkness, how strength can be forged through pain." She opened the box, revealing a simple platinum band set with a small, perfect sapphire. "I don't want to wait any longer to ask if you'll build your life with me. Not because I'm afraid of losing you, but because I'm certain I want to keep choosing you, every day, through whatever comes next." The words that had once been so difficult to trust came easily now. "Yes," I said simply. "Yes to all of it." That night, with Elena's ring catching moonlight from our bedroom window, I felt a sense of completion I'd never expected to find. Not because another person made me whole, I'd learned that lesson the hardest way possible, but because I'd become whole on my own, and now chose to share that wholeness with someone worthy of it. The gallery was already filling with people when we arrived the next evening. I wore a simple black dress that accentuated my now healthy frame, my hair styled in the short cut I'd kept even after it had grown back fully. Elena wore a tailored charcoal suit that complemented her natural elegance, my ring visible on her hand as she greeted Marcos. "There's already interest from collectors," he told us excitedly, and a curator from the Modern Museum stopped by earlier to preview. The exhibition space was transformed by my photographs. Arranged chronologically, they told the story not just of illness, but of metamorphosis. The early images were stark, unflinching. My gaunt face after diagnosis, the sterile hospital room, the IV lines threading into my veins. These gave way gradually to images capturing small moments of beauty found within suffering. Sunlight through hospital blinds creating patterns on sterile floors, a nurse's hand gently adjusting blankets, the unexpected vibrancy of medical waste against institutional gray. The final section showed recovery and beyond, self-portraits revealing the gradual return of physical strength alongside a new kind of resilience in my eyes. The centerpiece triptych dominated the back wall, larger than life, charting the journey from devastation to rebirth. I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations, explaining technical choices, watching strangers absorb my most vulnerable moments, transformed into art. Elena stayed nearby but gave me space to have this moment, her quiet pride evident in her smile whenever our eyes met across the room. An hour into the evening, I felt a shift in the energy around me. I turned to find Nikolai standing there, more hesitant than I'd ever seen him, his confident banker's demeanor replaced by something almost humble. "Annika," he said, my name sounding strange in his voice after so long. "You look incredible. Your work is... I've been following your success." I studied him calmly, noting the new lines around his eyes, the slight slump in shoulders that had once been held with perfect posture. He looked diminished somehow, though I couldn't tell if it was my changed perspective or actual physical change. "How's Valentina?" I asked, the question genuine rather than barbed. His face fell slightly. "She left 2 years ago. Turns out running when things get difficult is contagious." He attempted a self-deprecating laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "I've changed. I realize what I threw away." I studied his face, once the center of my universe, now just another person at my exhibition. I felt no triumph at his suffering, no desire for revenge, just peace. "Come with me," I said. "There's someone you should meet." I led him to my centerpiece photograph, a silhouette of a woman with her arms outstretched against a sunrise titled Rebirth. Elena stood beside it, elegant in her tailored suit, explaining the technical aspects to an art critic. "This is my wife, Elena," I said as she turned, her smile warming as our eyes met. "She's also my oncologist, the one who believed I'd survive, when the odds said otherwise, the one who stayed." Elena took my hand naturally, our matching rings catching the gallery lights. Understanding dawned slowly across Nikolai's face, not just that I had moved on, but that I had found something far more authentic than what we'd shared. "I'm glad you found happiness," he managed finally, his voice strained. "The truest healing," I told him softly, wasn't surviving cancer. It was discovering I deserved someone who wouldn't just promise to stay during the storm, but who actually would. As we walked away to greet other guests, I glanced back once to see him still standing, there, alone amid my photographs of survival and transformation. There was no bitterness in my heart, only gratitude for the painful catalyst that had forced me to rebuild myself stronger. My international exhibition tour would begin next month. Elena had arranged her schedule to join me for most of it. Life, stretched before us, full of possibility and commitment tested by fire rather than merely promised in fair weather. My revenge wasn't in hurting him, but in loving myself, enough to recognize what real commitment looked like. In the end, I got the last laugh, not through spite, but through joy, the kind that only comes when you stop accepting promises and start demanding presence. The rest of the evening passed, in a blur of congratulations and conversations. Critics praised the raw honesty of the work. Fellow cancer survivors thanked me for giving visual form to experiences they'd struggled to articulate. Art collectors discussed potential purchases, with Marcos, who shot me excited glances across the room. Through it all, I kept returning to the moment with Nikolai, turning it over in my mind like a strange artifact from another life. There had been no dramatic confrontation, no tears or accusations, none of the scenarios I might once have imagined. Just a quiet acknowledgement of what was lost and what was found. Later that night, as Elena and I walked home along the waterfront, she asked about our encounter. "How do you feel about seeing him?" I considered the question carefully, wanting to be honest with her and with myself. "Lighter," I said finally. "Like I've put down something heavy I didn't realize I was still carrying." She nodded, understanding as she always did. "Closure looks different than people expect." It wasn't even about forgiveness, I continued, the realization crystallizing as I spoke. It was about seeing him clearly, without anger or love distorting the view. He's just a person who made choices I wouldn't make, who couldn't be who I needed when it mattered. And who missed out on the amazing woman you became, Elena added, squeezing my hand. The following morning, I woke to news that the exhibition had sold out. Every photograph had been purchased, including the centerpiece triptych, acquired by the Modern Museum for their permanent collection. Marcos called, his voice breathless with excitement, talking about international interest, a book deal, opportunities that exceeded anything I'd imagined. This is just the beginning, he promised. Your story resonates in a profound way. After the call, I sat by our apartment window, watching early light paint the city in gentle gold. Elena brought coffee, settling beside me in comfortable silence. My story, I said finally. It's strange to think that the worst time in my life has become this thing of value to others. Not just the worst time, Elena corrected gently. The transformation. That's what people respond to. They see themselves in your journey. She was right, of course. The exhibition wasn't simply documenting illness or abandonment. It chronicled resurrection, the painful process of becoming someone new when the old self can no longer survive. The international tour exceeded all expectations. My work was exhibited in London, Paris, Tokyo, cities I'd once dreamed of visiting but had put aside for more practical concerns when I was with Nikolai. Elena joined me for most of it, her steady presence a reminder of how far I'd come from that hospital bed where I'd once lain alone and defeated. In each city, I spoke to audiences about survival beyond mere physical recovery, about finding strength in vulnerability, about the unexpected gifts that sometimes come disguised as loss. I met others who had been abandoned during illness, who saw their own experiences reflected in my images and found comfort in that recognition. The book was published a year later, my photographs accompanied by journal entries I'd written during treatment and recovery. It became a resource in hospital waiting rooms, a companion for those navigating their own dark nights. I received letters from strangers telling me how my story had helped them find their way back to themselves. On the 3rd anniversary of my remission, Elena and I returned to the cliff where Nikolai had once proposed, where I had once believed I'd found my future. The symmetry wasn't lost on me, but there was no bitterness in revisiting this place, only appreciation for how differently life had unfolded than I'd planned. We stood at the edge, watching waves crash against rocks below, the endless cycle of destruction and renewal playing out in miniature. I used to think love was about grand promises, I said, the wind carrying my words out to sea. About someone swearing to stay no matter what. Elena waited, letting me find my way to what I needed to say. Now I know it's about showing up, day after day, especially when it's difficult, especially when there's nothing romantic about it. She smiled, taking my hand. Like changing IV bags and holding back hair during vomiting fits? Exactly, I laughed. Not exactly the stuff of poetry. I don't know, she mused. There's something very poetic about loving someone at their worst, about seeing beauty where others only see brokenness. I thought about the woman I'd been. The last time I stood on this cliff, so eager to please, so afraid of being alone that I'd diminished myself to fit someone else's vision. How completely that woman had died during those hospital nights, making room for this newer, truer version to emerge. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd had to lose everything, health, security, the future I'd planned, to finally find myself. That abandonment had ultimately been the gift that forced me to discover my own worth. What are you thinking about? Elena asked, noticing my silence. About rebirth, I replied. About how sometimes we need to be broken open to become who we're meant to be. She nodded, understanding as she always did. And about how some people walk away too soon, before witnessing the transformation. We turned from the cliff edge, walking back toward our future together. I carried no regrets, no residual anger, no what-ifs or might-have-beens. The road had been harder than I could have imagined, the lessons more painful than seemed fair. But I had emerged stronger, clearer, more authentically myself than would have been possible without that journey through fire. Later that month, I received a letter postmarked from abroad. Inside was a clipping of a gallery review from a European newspaper, showing one of my photographs. A note in familiar handwriting read simply, "You were always stronger than I knew. I'm sorry I couldn't." See it then. Be happy, Annika. You deserve it. And I showed the note to Elena, who read it thoughtfully before handing it back. "Will you respond?" she asked. I considered the question, then shook my head. There's nothing left to say. We've both moved on. I placed the note in a drawer, not out of sentimentality, but as a final punctuation mark on a chapter long closed. My life now was full in ways I couldn't have imagined during those dark hospital days. Meaningful work, genuine love, a future built on my own terms. The woman who had once defined herself through Nikolai's eyes was gone, transformed through pain into someone stronger, someone who recognized her own worth. The abandonment that had once seemed like an ending had become instead the beginning of my true life. Not despite the betrayal and loss, but because of it. Because breaking apart had forced me to rebuild myself, piece by piece, into someone I was finally proud to be. In the end, being left during my greatest need had given me my greatest gift. The chance to discover that I could not only survive alone, but thrive. The chance to understand that real love isn't about staying when it's easy, but showing up when it's hard. The chance to build a life not around someone else's promise, but around my own strength. This time I lived for me.